Hi, everyone. I'm not actually sure when okay, I can get, thank you. Toby's just sent me a message, ready to go whenever you are. Okay, all right. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm not sure where everyone is calling in from, but thanks for joining this session. So I'm going to talk to you about what we learned along the way to setting up the talent intelligence function at SAP. So I'm Teresa Wykes. I've been leading the global team for 2 years, and I led the regional team for my first year there. But the talent intelligence team has been around for 3 years nearly. So this is just a bit of information about SAP. So we're a German company established quite a long time ago. We're sort of old tech rather than new tech. Very big, lots of customers. And a very large workforce. We're a German company, German parented. I've got some revenue figures there. This is from last year. We haven't got this year's out yet, but we're a market leader in business software, essentially. So that's a bit of the context around what we're doing. This is the, let me just get the hang of this screen a second, bear with me. Okay, this is where we sit. So within SAP's Global Talent Attraction team, we're one of the blue circles there. You've got the customer-facing talent functions in white. So we've got early careers, tech talent, and then the regional customer-facing areas as well as exec. And then we are a sort of support function along with Best Run, which is a bit like our project management team who look after our tech and our operations, a bit like a COO function, and then branding. And Global Talent Attraction at the moment, I believe, is 400 plus. We had quite a lot of investment last year. And then within that, this is my team, very simplified version. But I've got 2 streams of activity within Global Talent Intelligence. We've got a talent pipeline and engagement team, and that's split up into regions, as you can see there. And then we have a global talent research team who work on things like executive level succession management and competitor intelligence, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I will share with you here. So this is what we do now, and I'm showing you this at this stage before I get into how we arrived at it, because then I think I can refer back to it. I think it might illustrate the journey that we've been on a bit. These services we've arrived at over the course of the 3 years since we've been around. It didn't start like this at all. It's kind of evolved. This is where we are now, and that could actually change next year. But we do talent community build and cultivation across professional levels and exec levels. We do what we call talent showcasing, which is where we're really literally showcasing talent to the business, usually in terms of educating them, or perhaps where there's something new that's being planned, or perhaps where there's performance issues and we want to have a look at plan B. We do a big project called diversity socialization, which is essentially creating a female sales pipeline that then is socialized with the business leaders ahead of need. Some of that gets converted into hires, but it's essentially a way of cracking open the diverse market, one of our key talent areas, which is sales and pre-sales. We look after external succession management in talent intelligence. That's typically at what we call our L1 level, which is board -1, sometimes -2. That's mostly again a kind of behind the curtain exercise or a socialization exercise, particularly as we move into the cloud and need talent that we haven't had before. We do quite a lot of ad hoc skills and location analysis work, and we use mostly LinkedIn Talent Insights for that. That's our tool. Or we do our own original research. We did used to have other tools, but we weren't really using them to a sort of commercial level. So we've stuck with LinkedIn for now. We look at a lot of emerging talent locations. That's original research. We look at tech talent hubs. We look at digital sales hubs, areas where we need to know where the new talent is. We do loads of competitor intelligence. That's mostly original research. Our competitor talent landscape is really opening up at the moment, so we can add a lot of value there. We do talent battle cards, which draw on all sorts of levers, and it's a very, very detailed piece of work that's ongoing. We've yet to extend that globally, but yeah, that's a very strategic piece of work. We've just started doing talent persona mapping, which is again very interesting work. It's really about sort of myth busting in that there's a lot of assumptions made about talent, and I think we pull this work exactly from conversations that we have with the talent. I think David referred to this earlier on his panel conversation. We've got a lot of original talent preference insight there, so that's mostly what that leads to. We do currently do quite a lot of enablement within talent attraction as well, mostly around full life cycle proactive talent pipeline behaviours. So how to have career conversation, how to make appropriate approaches, and how to cultivate talent over the longer term. Competitor landscape, I think I said earlier, that's constantly changing for us, and opening up, so we can add quite a lot of value there. And we've just started doing some white paper type stuff. I don't want us to sound like we're a sort of very highbrow cerebral team, because actually I think a lot of what we do has become quite simplified, but this is really looking at perhaps more cerebral topics such as quantum computing or the metaverse, and particularly with a talent lens on what that might mean for SAP. So that's sort of where we are now, what the team looks like. Let me just go into next what we learned to get to this point, and what we think we got right and what we maybe got wrong, and what we're even still learning. I'm happy for all of you guys to post questions, by the way. The way I'm presenting this, I can't actually monitor the chat at the same time, unless I'm missing something technically, in which case, Alan, please ping me. But I'm going to go through my deck, and maybe I can come back to the chat a bit later, if that's okay. And I'm totally happy for anyone to reach out to me separately as well. So, number one, decide your version of talent intelligence. This has been done to death, so I'm not going to go into it in any huge amount of detail, but I will talk about the things that particularly shaped our journey here. First of all, I believe that at SAP, the version of talent intelligence that we ended up doing was a kind of direct reflection of what TA was or was not doing. In other words, how evolved is that team? How strategic are they? What's the expectation of the business? And I think we learned that we could actually plug some really useful gaps. We're actually, and SAP being a sort of dinosaur of a company, we always have to bring it back to a hiring agenda at some point. Hence, we have those talent engagement teams working to create pipelines and stay in touch with the market. The reporting line that we have is into Elka. She leads global talent attraction. That sits within HR. However, I would say that probably we've got depending on what time of year it is, we've probably got a reasonable split between TA being our customers and the business being our customers. So there is a sort of ongoing debate, conversation about whether we actually are sitting in the right location reporting line wise, but we've certainly got influence in the right places. We work quite closely with the board, and I probably wasn't expecting that actually. I think someone put a comment in an earlier topic about in the chat saying that actually it's often the executive leaders that respond most to talent intelligence. So that was actually quite a nice surprise to find that the board at SAP was so receptive. Culture and values. So SAP is very long service culture, also very strong internal hiring culture as well, mostly because of the size that we are. And also it's a German company, so things like GDPR and compliance have a very, very high level of importance. I think that really has dictated, the version of talent intelligence that we've been able to have for various obvious reasons. I wasn't so aware of the extent to which long service and internal hiring would feature, but it's been very interesting to see where we can work around that and where we can be rebellious. In fact, it's probably meant we can be even more rebellious in the work that we do and the type of insight and data that we're providing, because it's in such a contrast to what's already existing. But I think the important thing for me and the team, I believe in talent intelligence, and we talk about this all the time, is that actually the activity that we've done has been different every year, and I don't expect that to change. And I think it's you know, we can expect to change as often as the business changes. Really where we are now in terms of our sort of broad manifesto is that we're providing information about talent and information about competitor activity to enhance decision making. But importantly, it involves activity that's not being done by anyone else in TA at the moment. And again, that's probably the sort of German culture of efficiency. So we have a competitor market insights team, we have a people analytics team, we have a reward team. We talk to each other, but we're reasonably respectful of each other's areas of specialism. So yeah, that's all I'll say on version of TI. Importantly, though, I feel like this version of talent intelligence and something that I brought with me and from my previous role, which was more a commercial role, this is all about consumption. And if the company that you're in or the company where you're trying to take talent intelligence to isn't ready for talent intelligence, then that's going to affect the return on your investment. So that's really underpins everything that we do. It is all about consumption. And I think you can look at things like auditing TA, you can look at, you know, what's broken or what's excellent in TA, what are the problems that TI can't actually fix, where can they add value, how strategic does TA need to be, how much does the business really know about talent, that's quite important, how externally focused is the business, that was important for us, who owns relationships, who might block them, and crucially, can you actually get involved in business planning with the data you're providing, or are you just executing? So I'll move on to something else that was important for us. When I joined SAP, I think I thought it was going to be like MI6. You know, it's a very highbrow, technologically advanced environment, and therefore talent intelligence really needs to be high kicking. But I was wrong. I think I assumed that everybody knew what this would be, and that it therefore needed to be everything. You know, we needed to kind of show our cards all at the same time. Basically, though, and this is something that we're still working on all the time, simplicity is best. And it's taken probably 3 years to build this up to a point where the business is comfortable with it. So even more reason to go down a simplistic route. It's very much based on what is happening in the business and what would be useful. So in our case, we're moving to cloud, and we don't have the talent that we need to make that journey effectively. Plus, this is a huge transformation program from all angles. So talent intelligence has become a bit of a change agent, and sometimes quite disruptive. Sometimes we piss people off. Sometimes we're a breath of fresh air. But, you know, our job is to be purely objective. So it's important that we also think about our audience. I think sometimes in talent intelligence, because we often produce such a lot of content, we can forget actually that this has no value unless it's being consumed by someone or used by someone. So brevity is everything. I still spend quite a lot of time, and I'm smiling. Hopefully my team will, you know, be smiling too. But we write far too much. Our decks are far too detailed. You know, that kind of stuff doesn't get consumed. So, you know, being very brief, being very simple is really important. And I think you can be basic and still be an expert. I think it can actually have impact, even if you are providing something that you think is quite simple. And I think in talent intelligence, we all have a very strong educational responsibility that I think we should really own. I think we're in a very privileged position as well. It's actually quite a nice advantage to do the work that we do. I think as well, directionally correct is okay versus perfection. I think we maybe used to seek perfection in terms of the data, that the cleanliness of the data that we're providing. In a company our size, directionally is okay. And I think as well, in terms of our audience, your stakeholders might not necessarily be who you think they are or who they should be. We've had huge success in very random corners of the organisation, which I'll talk about in a little while, in terms of getting your evangelists behind you. And I think in terms of the impact that you can have by assuming that no one knows anything about talent intelligence, is to perhaps devise one kind of mega project very early on and roadshow it around. You want the greatest influence with the greatest number of people, and make sure at the same time that you're claiming your territory, and you're if you're doing original research, to call it original research. We tried to approach this a bit like it was a startup, and that's because it was new, right? There wasn't anything like this before. We also weren't given a remit, so no one said to us, right, we're going to create a talent intelligence team and this is what you're going to work on. There was broadly some pillars of activity, but the kind of the solutions that we would deliver, that was never laid out. So I think, like I said, devise projects that have an impact while you build your services, and define the creative and the strategic connection to the business via those projects. And again, simplify, reduce that stakeholder map. You're never going to be everything to everyone. So choose your customers, and then get them. Once they've become fans, get them to evangelize, particularly in the early days. It was important for us, and we sort of came to this a bit late in the evolution, that we would brand our output. I think it's important to differentiate the skills in the team and be creative about how you're presenting your stuff. So we have a logo. I know a lot of other teams do that as well. I'm always, quite dogged about how I describe what we're doing. I treat every sort of new interaction as a bit like a new business development meeting. I also think that we probably should have worked harder in the early days to establish what our risks and compromises would be. In other words, what can we deliver? What can't we deliver? Do we want to be problem solving, or do we want to just educate people? I think we thought we could solve problems. I don't think we solve as many problems as enlighten thinking or educate, but that's very much based on what the business needs you to be, and how much they're listening. Timing as well is important. At SAP, like in many other businesses, there's very key dates and a sort of cadence of activity. So if you get someone on the wrong day, your work will just be ignored. So we have to really be close to the business and the diary of the business about what's happening in terms of when we engage and when we don't, particularly as we need quite a lot from our business stakeholders in terms of engaging with the talent and engaging with the data that we provide to move things on. I think it's nice to share short samples of your work as well. This is our portfolio, or this is an example of our portfolio. Do you like this? Would you like some more of that? Or is this the sort of thing that you mean? Asking if it captures their thinking, not assuming that we've got it right, experimenting basically, and taking risks here and there and seeing what goes down well. And then if something is very well received, we do a load more of it. The other thing that we started doing recently is to start pricing every piece of work that we do. I think that's just a kind of best practice commercial approach. We haven't done it until now, but I really want to do that just to see if it perhaps adds another angle to the value that we're bringing. And I think more importantly, we're quite an energetic, dynamic sort of. I think we have quite a bit of fun. I think that's important. I think it's important in talent intelligence to have fun, actually, and to be a bit naughty sometimes, because you are implicitly impartial in the data that we're providing. We are supposed to be objective. We are supposed to be telling the truth. So I think you can have fun with that, in an appropriate way, obviously. The last thing I wanted to talk about on my deck was just about how we've hired And we started off trying to repurpose. We made a load of new hires. We also had some existing people. And that was quite challenging because it didn't allow us to differentiate the skills. So I think it's important that teams doing talent intelligence work really do work quite hard to differentiate what's different about what they're doing in terms of what the wider population are doing. And equally, when you're hiring people, be very clear about the purpose of talent intelligence and the version of talent intelligence that you're doing, because there's so much misconception, or people want it to be something, so they end up believing that's what it is, and then they come into the organization, actually it's not what they thought it was at all. And the same goes for research projects as well. You know, we all know that there's quite a lot of detailed going down rabbit holes, you know, quite arduous work sometimes. And I think it's important to be honest about that. So we learned that, you know, we needed to cover off some of that stuff and to be quite honest in those when we were talking to talent, when we were hiring talent. Surprisingly and quite nicely, we found that early talent really responded really well to the sort of talent intelligence role content. I guess you've got a bit of everything in there, and you've got real, you know, nice breadth of exposure. Similarly, I think it's an area that really lends itself well to internships and fellowships and, you know, project work, having people across from other teams. What that also means is that, you know, we need to be quite careful, and we're probably not there yet, about devising a very solid development program. You know, I guess our development feels like it's happened quite quickly, but I guess over the course of 3 years, people have developed as individuals, and now we've kind of got a handle on our service lines and we've got our reputation nicely established. I think we can start looking at things like career paths and probably expertise career paths. I think it's always difficult. I still find it difficult knowing whether people need to be generalists or specialists. Certainly, we think that the regional specialism counts for a lot. So much nuance going on in different parts of the world. So I let the regional teams do their thing pretty much because I need to, you know, let them respect the relationships and the way things are done locally. But generally, I think, you know, when we're hiring, and the skills that I particularly look for is intellectual curiosity. Absolutely. People who have a good attention span, people who read stuff, people who are interested in the world of work, and people who are interested in people's careers and what's happening in the world of work. There's a lot of content at the moment. I think that's, you know, I think we've gained a new audience actually, which is good for talent intelligence. But I mean, in very simple terms, you know, we started to look at the outputs that we wanted to create, and then we worked back to the skills that we needed. And, you know, particularly on the early talent and intern side, there's a lot of work that can be supported, and that really supported some of our startup mentality as well, because we had to create a kind of library of items of content that everything else would then flow from. For example, you know, competitor lists, movers and shakers, always on projects, you know, some stuff that you always need data on, stuff that the business might ask about at any time. So yeah, so I guess we've got to this point. We're still, you know, we are still learning. And you know, I'm proud of the team and you know, what we've managed to create so far. I realise some of this is specific to the environment that we're in, but hopefully there'll be some useful stories there. Anyway, I'm gonna stop sharing and come back into the room, and I'm just going to look at the chat and see if there's any questions. Q&A. I need to look at the Q&A. Okay. Alan, could you help? Oh no, Q&A. Yes. Okay. Okay. Establishing prices on outputs is great when you're building and educating versus problem solving. What other ways are you setting, measuring, demonstrating value, KPIs, etc.? Hi, Christine. Thanks for that question. That's a good question. So we, if we're talking about our clients and our stakeholders, we use Qualtrics and we get feedback. That's fairly reductive, so we quite like, you know, some narrative feedback as well, particularly while we're you know in such early days in the business. In terms of KPIs and things like that for the team, some of it is quantitative, some of it is qualitative. Everyone's got a community that they need to build and look after, and that has numerical metrics around it. I think mostly it comes from feedback, and I think it mostly comes from actually just creating the content. And at the moment, you know, we're seeing a lot of really nice feedback from TA in terms of how we've been able to support them. Yeah, that's what I would say there. But next year could be different. You know, we could have different KPIs next year. We're more about cultivation next year actually than pipeline build. So I'll need to come up with some different KPIs there. We've got a couple more minutes if anyone's got any other questions. Okay, if not, I'll wrap this up then. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for having me, Alan. Oh, hold on a sec. No, there's another question there. Natalia, hi Natalia. Saying there was no awareness of TI at all when you joined SAP. What's your final ideal vision of TI SAP today? Gosh, I think in some ways we've got it to a level where the business can cope with. Now, I think it's slower than I thought it would be in terms of how much we've been able to teach them, perhaps. So I feel like next year, and mostly because of the economic environment, is going to be a kind of you know, embedding, doubling down type of year. So I think we can watch this space there. I think things might look a bit different afterwards. If we get investment in headcount, it would obviously look different. We can organise ourselves differently. We can bring in new projects. I always keep a list of things that we might want to think about doing, but I think for now we've got a good level of digestion and consumption in the business. I wouldn't want to chuck too much more out there right now. Mark, hi Mark. Reading the details is an important skill as well as writing, simplifying and presenting the detail input to output with audience consumption focused lens. How do you find both ends of this skill set in your hiring? Yeah, I know that's quite difficult. I think it's quite rare. I think also throughout the team we've got different skill sets, so you know, it's okay if not everybody's got the whole thing, and we're reasonably streamlined in how we present and how, you know, who does what. We have to be quite organised. I think it's just a matter of being organised, Mark, and playing to everybody's strength. You know, it'd be very unusual that one person would have, you know, exclusivity in delivering a project. We've got quite a lot of peer review going on, so we tend to make sure that everybody's strengths are deployed in that way. Christine's got another question. What's been most effective in making outputs highly consumable? So being brief, Christine. Just even if you've got 2 versions of the same report or 3 versions of the same report, in some cases, you know, we've got a show version, then we've got a kind of written report version that will go, you know, alongside it. More talking, less content, that kind of thing. In terms of consumption of things like competitor intelligence, we would always take a really hardcore briefing and find out exactly what that stakeholder wanted to do with that project before we deliver it. So, you know, what do you want to do with this? Who's going to see it? Over what period of time? Because obviously a lot of competitor intelligence goes out of date quite quickly. And coaching as well. We've had to coach the business and TA quite a lot about how to use the work that we do. and just staying on top of it. I mean, I'm, you know, the particularly my engagement managers will know so much that you just really have to work on relationships and get in front of the right people quite a lot, and just, you know, keep repeating the messages. I'm just conscious we're at time. Alan, we need to wrap this up? It looks like the questions are ending. So yeah, I'll let everyone go. I think it's lunchtime, isn't it? Thanks very much. And like I said, very happy to connect with people offline. And thanks very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Okay, bye everyone.